Welcome to this video. In this video we're going to talk about hypercholesterolemia and statin therapy. So let me begin by giving you an agenda for this video. So we're going to begin the video with an introductory part, and in the introductory part we will talk about what is cholesterol and the basics of how cholesterol is transported around the human body. After that, we'll move on to the main part of the video in which we'll talk about hypercholesterolemia. And hypercholesterolemia is the fancy medical name for having too high concentration of cholesterol within your blood. Now, there are two main forms of hypercholesterolemia. Idiopathic hypercholesterolemia, which is extremely common, especially in older people, and then a much rarer genetic disease called familial hypercholesterolemia, which people have from birth. So we'll discuss both of these. After we finish that, and by the way, the part where we discuss hypercholesterolemia is the part where we will discuss the pictures that I have here. So ignore these pictures for now, we'll come on to those when we actually discuss hypercholesterolemia. So after we've finished discussing hypercholesterolemia, we'll then go on to the final part of the video in which we will discuss the statins. We'll discuss the different types of statins and we'll discuss briefly the mechanism of action of statins. And in case you don't already know, statins are the drugs that we currently use to bring people's blood cholesterol concentration down when they are hypercholesterolemic. So, let's begin then with the introductory section. What is cholesterol then is the question we need to answer. Cholesterol is a lipid molecule that belongs to the class of molecules known as sterols. And despite all of the bad press it gets, and it really does get a huge amount of bad press, it is actually essential for life. And the reason that it is essential for life is that every single cell within your body uses cholesterol to build its phospholipid bilayer. So let me go over that again. Every cell in your body has a cell membrane, and that cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, and that is made up of a huge number of different types of lipid molecules, and one of the lipid molecules that is absolutely essential to build a phospholipid bilayer is actually cholesterol. So every human cell in your body relies on cholesterol. So this is not an evil molecule. This is a molecule that is essential for life. Yes, when you get hypercholesterolemia, the balance tips and it starts doing things that aren't brilliant, and we'll discuss those later. But it is actually, in principle, a molecule that is essential for life. So nail that into your head. It is not an evil devil molecule. It is actually very, very important. Now, where does the human body get cholesterol from? So there are two main sources of cholesterol for the human body, one of which is extremely famous and one of which is less famous. The famous source of cholesterol is, of course, dietary cholesterol. We eat foods that contain cholesterol. The gastrointestinal tract, bless it, does its job and absorbs that cholesterol into the bloodstream, and then that cholesterol can be distributed to the peripheral tissues, and we'll discuss in a bit of time in more detail how cholesterol is actually transported around the bloodstream, because it is not as simple as a layperson might think. So that is one source of cholesterol, however, dietary cholesterol, and certain foods are much richer in cholesterol than other foods. In particular, animal products are very good sources of cholesterol, so meat, dairy and eggs, these all contain lots of cholesterol. Plant products are less good sources of cholesterol. So overall, the key thing about dietary cholesterol is animal products have a lot more cholesterol than plant products. So vegans are going to get much less dietary cholesterol than meat eaters. Next, the other less famous source of cholesterol is that the liver can actually synthesize cholesterol de novo. And de novo is just a fancy way of saying it can newly synthesize cholesterol from other, much simpler molecules. So your liver, all of our livers, provided you have a functional liver, and most people do, your liver is capable of making cholesterol from much, much smaller, simpler molecules, and that is another way then in which the body can actually get cholesterol that it needs. And the principle is that if you have a large dietary intake of cholesterol, then this makes it easier for your liver. Your liver isn't going to have to make as much cholesterol because you're getting all your cholesterol from the dietary sources. Whereas if you have a diet that doesn't have as much cholesterol in, then of course your liver's going to have to make more cholesterol to compensate for that. And the reason that we continuously need a supply of cholesterol is because we're continuously having to make more phospholipid bilayer. So in your body, and let's say we're talking about an adult body, so we're not talking about a child who is growing, but of course if a child's growing then they're going to need even more cholesterol, but let's say we're talking about an adult, there is a continual turnover of cells. So to take an archetypal example, if you go to the skin, we are continuously shedding skin cells, epidermal cells, and the epidermis is continuously having to replace itself. So there is a continual cell division in the basal stem cells of the epidermis. And when a cell divides, of course, it's going to have to double the amount of cell membrane it has, and therefore it's going to need cholesterol for that. So anywhere in your body where cell division is occurring, and the skin is a classical example, you're going to need a continuous supply of cholesterol in order to make the new phospholipid bilayer that is required in order for those cells to divide. So that's why we need a continual input of cholesterol. We have these two different sources, dietary and de novo synthesis by the liver, and if one goes down, i.e. if dietary cholesterol is less, then de novo synthesis is going to go up. If your dietary cholesterol is very high, then of course de novo synthesis will go down. So let's now talk then about the transportation of cholesterol around the human body, and we're only going to do this in a tiny little bit of detail. I'm going to give you the basics of it, the broad overview. I'm not going to go into the microscopic details. I just want you to have the basic concept. So let's draw a little picture of this. So we'll draw the liver. The liver is very, very important in cholesterol transportation around the body, in cholesterol metabolism. So we'll start with that. So here is the liver. It is, if you like, the central hub for cholesterol metabolism. It's where all the cholesterol that is coming into the body is going to first go to, and then it will send it on to the peripheral tissues. So it is a relay station. It's the central control hub. So let's now add on to this picture the gastrointestinal tract. And what colour shall I go for the gastrointestinal tract? We'll have this light green. So here, just a very basic picture of the gastrointestinal tract. So that will do. I won't draw the entire thing. So here is a portion of the small intestine that I'm completing up now. Here is the stomach, and here is the esophagus. Now, let's draw a flow diagram then of what's going to happen. So we have our dietary cholesterol coming in here. So we eat cholesterol, it goes into the gastrointestinal tract. We also have our de novo cholesterol synthesis, and we'll have that just up here. So the liver can synthesize cholesterol de novo, remember, from much simpler molecules. All the little hepatocytes are capable of doing this, so we can also get cholesterol coming in that way. So this is just showing our two inputs of cholesterol into the human body. Now, back to the gastrointestinal tract. The gastrointestinal tract has broken down all the food into the small molecular constituents, one of which is cholesterol. We are now ready to absorb cholesterol into the portal venous blood, which of course goes to the liver first. Remember basic anatomy, the blood that comes from the gastrointestinal tract doesn't just get dumped back into the systemic circulation, it goes into the portal circulation, goes to the liver first, and then is returned to the systemic circulation. And that's so that the liver can take things out and alter things before everything goes into the systemic circulation, because who knows what's coming from the gastrointestinal tract, who knows what you've managed to eat, or sorry, who knows what you've managed to eat. So remember that principle of anatomy. Now, cholesterol, I said earlier, transportation in the blood is more complicated than you might think. And the reason for that is that cholesterol is a lipid molecule. It is not particularly water soluble. And that means that you cannot just dump it into the blood and expect it to dissolve and be circulated around the body. That's not what will happen. If you try dumping cholesterol into the blood, it will come out of solution and it will just deposit on the blood vessel walls. And that is exactly what you do not want. So, the body has come up with an ingenious solution for this. We have created, or, well, not we, but the body has got these structures known as lipoproteins that are the means by which cholesterol is actually able to be transported around the human body. Now, I do not want to go into the microscopic detail of what a lipoprotein is. I just want to give you the basic overview of it. So this is the word, firstly, lipoprotein. And the word is actually quite telling. Lipo refers to lipid molecules and protein refers to protein molecules. And these structures consist of lipid molecules and protein molecules, so it's quite a good name. Now, the basic picture that I want you to have of a lipoprotein is that it is a spherical structure. And this spherical structure contains a huge number of protein molecules and lipid molecules, and it is capable then of moving around the bloodstream. So you can put one of these lipoproteins in the blood, it doesn't just deposit out, it remains dissolved, and it can move around the bloodstream and deliver the lipid molecules that are contained within it to the tissues that they're going to. So I'll say that again, just so that we're all clear and we have a nice summary. Cholesterol and indeed other lipid molecules are difficult to transport in the bloodstream because they are lipid soluble and not particularly water soluble. The solution to this is that we have these structures called lipoproteins, which consist of lots of lipid molecules that are being carried in the lipoprotein, and then really importantly some very special protein molecules that are amongst the lipid molecules and which are on the outside of the spherical structure, and these protein molecules interact with the water molecules that are within the blood, and they manage to make the whole thing dissolve amazingly. Now, this then is the means by which we transport lipid molecules in the bloodstream. We put them into these structures called lipoproteins that somehow amazingly do manage to dissolve in the bloodstream and don't just deposit out. These circulate in the bloodstream and lipid molecules can then be taken out of these once they've arrived at their destination. There are different types of lipoproteins, and the different types of lipoproteins perform different roles in the transportation of lipid molecules around the body. And we're obviously interested in cholesterol. There are different lipoproteins that are involved in transporting cholesterol at different stages of the transportation. So let's go back to our diagram. So we have our dietary cholesterol here that the gastrointestinal tract is now ready to absorb. The gastrointestinal tract wants this cholesterol to move to the liver. And the way in which it does this is by packaging it into a specific type of lipoprotein known as a chylomicron. So let me add this onto our picture here. So we're going to have an arrow here, which I'll have in purple, and the type of lipoprotein. Because I don't want to take up too much space, because we've got limited space up here, I'm just going to put next to that arrow a C there, and that C is standing for chylomicron. So a chylomicron is a specific type of lipoprotein, and its purpose is to transport lipid molecules that have been absorbed in the gastrointestinal tract from the gastrointestinal tract into the portal venous system and then to the liver. And cholesterol is one of the lipid molecules that is going to be transported by chylomicrons. So dietary cholesterol, this is how it's going to get to the liver. The central hub for cholesterol metabolism is the liver, so it needs to get there first, and the means by which it gets there is it goes into these lipoprotein structures. Specifically, the one that takes it from the gastrointestinal tract to the liver is called a chylomicron. Now, chylomicrons are created by the cells of the gastrointestinal epithelium, the enterocytes. They're synthesized within those cells and then they're released into the bloodstream. And they circulate through the portal venous system to the liver, and they're then going to get to the hepatocytes, where the hepatocytes are going to take the lipids from the chylomicrons. In particular, in our story, they're going to take the cholesterol from the chylomicrons. So this is how we deliver our cholesterol from the gastrointestinal tract to the liver. The next stage then. The liver is the central hub. We have both inputs coming now into the liver. The de novo cholesterol and the gastrointestinal cholesterol is going to come into the liver. But of course, the liver isn't the final destination for the cholesterol. We need the cholesterol now to get to the peripheral tissues. How does the liver get the cholesterol to the peripheral tissues? Well, of course, it needs to put it back into the bloodstream. In order to put it into the bloodstream, it needs to put it into another lipoprotein. So there is another type of lipoprotein that carries cholesterol from the liver to the peripheral tissues, and this is LDL. So let's add on to our diagram here. So here, I'm just going to write peripheral tissues. So this is the target for the cholesterol, and the means by which we take cholesterol from the liver to the peripheral tissues is by a lipoprotein known as LDL. And LDL stands for low density lipoprotein. So I will write that down in full because it's very important. So low density lipoprotein. This is the lipoprotein that carries cholesterol from the liver to the peripheral tissues. And the peripheral tissues can then take the cholesterol out of that lipoprotein and use it for whatever purpose they need. So this is the basics of how we get cholesterol around the body. There is one final thing that I want to put on this diagram, which is another type of lipoprotein called high density lipoprotein, HDL. So what does that do? Now, sometimes some of the peripheral tissues can end up having too much cholesterol, and they need to get rid of some of it. In order for that to happen, we need a special lipoprotein to take the cholesterol back from the peripheral tissues and take it back to the liver. LDL can't do that. LDL is a one-way system. It takes cholesterol from the liver and takes it to the peripheral tissues. So the peripheral tissues can take cholesterol out of LDL. Unfortunately, if they've got too much cholesterol, they can't just dump it back into the LDL. That would have been a sensible idea, but unfortunately that's not the way it works. Instead, we have a separate lipoprotein for doing that, and that is HDL. So on this diagram, we will put HDL in as so. It carries cholesterol back from the peripheral tissues to the liver. And again, I'll write down its name. It stands for high density lipoprotein, HDL for short. Now, HDL is initially synthesized in the liver, but when it's synthesized in the liver, it doesn't have much cholesterol. So it's synthesized, imagine a little sphere being synthesized by the liver, but imagine that sphere collapsed down, so looking more like this. That's what HDL looks like initially when it's synthesized by the liver. It's then put into the bloodstream, it goes to the peripheral tissues, and if any of those peripheral tissues have too much cholesterol, they dump the cholesterol into it. That cholesterol goes into the core of the lipoprotein, the center, and plumps it up into a sphere. And then the HDL returns back to the liver, and the liver takes the cholesterol out of it. So you return the cholesterol to the liver. And that is the basics of cholesterol transportation that I want you to understand in order for us to then discuss hypercholesterolemia. So let's just finish by summarizing it, and then we'll have a break, and in the next video we'll move on and discuss hypercholesterolemia. So overall, there are two main inputs of cholesterol into the human body: dietary and de novo synthesis by the liver. The main output of cholesterol is that we are continuously shedding cells. So we're continuously shedding skin cells that have cholesterol in their lipid bilayer, and we're also continuously losing gastrointestinal cells as well, which are shedding, and they will of course have cholesterol in their phospholipid bilayer as well. So that's the output from the human body. Now, when we eat dietary cholesterol, it is transported from the gastrointestinal tract to the liver. The liver is the central hub, remember, and the lipoprotein that transports it is chylomicrons. From the liver, the cholesterol that we're getting in from dietary and de novo synthesis then has to be carried to the peripheral tissues where it's needed. And in order to do that, the simple account of this, and by the way, this is a very simplified diagram of how it actually happens. If you know lipid metabolism in more detail, you will know that actually this arrow in particular is a lot more complicated than how I've said it. But I've simplified things down, and this is the core understanding that I want you to have. So, the core account of how this happens is that the liver puts the cholesterol into LDL lipoproteins, and the LDL lipoproteins deliver that cholesterol to the peripheral tissues. Some peripheral tissues sometimes end up with having too much cholesterol, and they need to get rid of that, and the means by which they do that is these high-density lipoproteins that accept cholesterol from cholesterol-overloaded peripheral tissues and will deliver it back to the central hub, the liver, and the liver will then package it back up into LDL lipoproteins. Thank you. That's the basics of the transportation. In the next video, we'll move on and discuss hypercholesterolemia, and we can discuss these pretty pictures that I have here.